All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the brilliant, honestly, kind of counterintuitive business logic behind one of the world's absolute biggest retail empires. And get this, we're talking about an empire built not on sky-high profit margins, but on a remarkably cheap lunch. Seriously, it's this incredible masterclass in consumer psychology and strategic pricing that has literally baffled competitors for decades. Let's get into it.
Picture this. You walk into a massive, echoing warehouse, and you grab a quarter-pound hot dog and a 20-ounce soda for exactly $1.50, $1.50. It's a perfectly cheap meal, a totally fantastic deal. And, let's be real, in today's economy with constant inflation, it almost feels like a glitch in the matrix, right? You hand over some pocket change, you get this hot, satisfying lunch, and you basically feel like you've won a tiny victory before your shopping even begins.
But here's where the real magic trick happens, about an hour later. See, you came in for that cheap lunch, but somehow you end up walking out with a $300 receipt. You're pushing a cart loaded up with a giant flat-screen TV, maybe a two-person kayak, and, I don't know, a 5-pound tub of mixed nuts you absolutely never planned to buy. It sounds impossible, right? But that exact psychological journey, that feeling of completely dropping your guard because you already scored a great deal, well, that is exactly how this company built its massive, unwavering success.
All right, Section 1, the $1.50 paradox.
So, to really wrap our heads around this paradox, we've got to go all the way back to 1983. That's when the very first warehouse opened its doors in Seattle. And it was built on a remarkably simple, yet completely risky idea for the time: sell high-quality products in enormous bulk sizes at extremely low prices. But to make those razor-thin margins actually work without going completely bankrupt, the founders introduced a fascinating twist. They asked customers to pay an upfront membership fee just for the privilege of walking through the front doors. At the time, asking people to pay money just for the right to spend more money seemed totally backward.
Moving on to Section 2, the real moneymaker. Okay, so how on earth do they actually make billions of dollars while keeping those warehouse prices so incredibly low? Well, they completely flipped the traditional retail script. Think about the normal stores you go to every day. They rely super heavily on product markups, right? They buy a product from a supplier for one price and sell it to you for a much higher one. That margin is basically their lifeblood. This warehouse, though, they essentially abandoned that whole model. They barely mark up their items at all, keeping a super tight cap on their margins. Instead, their massive profit engine runs almost entirely on those annual membership subscriptions.
As business analysts point out all the time, this model creates a remarkably stable source of income before customers even buy a single item. I mean, just think about the sheer staggering scale of that concept for a second. With tens of millions of highly loyal members paying an annual fee year after year, the company has this massive, guaranteed river of pure, high-margin profit flowing right into their accounts before a single box of cereal, pack of paper towels, or laptop ever hits a shopping cart. It completely insulates them from the typical roller coaster of retail sales.
Now, this wildly successful strategy definitely didn't just happen overnight. Shortly after that first opening, right around the mid-1980s, the company introduced its absolute most legendary weapon, the hot dog and soda combo. And you guys, here is the truly staggering part. Through 4 decades of massive economic shifts, global supply chain crises, and soaring inflation, that price has remained entirely unchanged. No, really, that $1.50 price tag is completely frozen in time. It acts as this unmovable anchor in a constantly changing economy. By keeping that price completely frozen for literally decades, the company knows they earn almost nothing on the transaction. In fact, actually, they likely lose money on the food itself, basically subsidizing the cost of the beef and the buns just to keep it at $1.50. But that is entirely brilliantly by design. See, they aren't in the business of making a fortune selling you lunch. They're selling you a profound feeling of unbeatable value. When you get an absolute steal on a hot dog, you inherently transfer that trust to the rest of the store. You just naturally assume, hey, I must be getting a steal on the electronics, the clothing, and the groceries too.
Which brings us to Section 3, the warehouse strategy.
So once that incredibly cheap meal gets you happily through the front doors, the brilliant in-store customer experience just completely takes over. You are immediately surrounded by these towering pallets of bulk products stacked all the way to the ceiling, compelling limited-time deals and exciting, totally unexpected treasure hunt items. This whole environment is carefully engineered to trigger a sense of discovery and encourage way larger, unplanned purchases. You come in for the lunch deal, but because the layout kind of forces you to navigate past a rotating selection of seasonal goods and luxury items, you suddenly find yourself pushing a flatbed cart with a giant television and a massive tub of mayonnaise. We've all been there.
But to actually afford these massive warehouses and those subsidized hot dogs, they ruthlessly and systematically cut operating costs in three main ways. First up, they offer a highly limited selection of products. So you don't suffer decision fatigue trying to choose from 50 different types of ketchup. They just offer you one or two bulk options, which severely streamlines their supply chain. Second, they buy in absolutely massive volumes to force wholesale costs straight down into the basement. And third, they just strip away all the retail fluff. No fancy end cap displays, no expensive lighting, and no perfectly tiled aisles, just raw wooden pallets resting heavily on sealed concrete floors.
Let's wrap it up with Section 4, the ultimate loss leader.
So in the broader retail world, this overarching concept is actually known as a loss leader. It's basically a strategic pricing maneuver where a single product is intentionally sold below its market cost to stimulate the sales of other, way more profitable goods and services. And that hot dog combo, it isn't just some quirky menu item, it is the absolute perfect loss leader. By intentionally taking a financial hit at the food court, they constantly physically reinforce their global reputation for unbeatable value. That triggers customers to happily renew those vital memberships every single year and visit the warehouse far more often than they normally would.
The beautiful reality of this entire system really just boils down to this one idea. The hot dog isn't the profit, it's the invitation. The massive recurring membership revenue, the ruthless operational efficiency, and that unparalleled, almost cult-like customer loyalty, those are the actual engines powering this company's long-term dominance. The incredibly cheap food is quite simply the welcoming handshake that gets you in the door, puts a smile on your face, and opens your wallet for the true shopping experience. To wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a fascinating question to ponder. What is the absolute smartest business strategy you've ever seen a company execute? Drop your thoughts in the comments. It is genuinely fascinating to see how the simplest, most mundane things like a cheap, inflation-proof lunch can act as the foundational bedrock for an absolute retail empire. I mean, it entirely changes the way you think about everything you buy, doesn't it? Anyway, thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you next time.